Hello, this is my first YouTube video. What's up? How's it going? Tonight, a piano gig that I had kind of fell through, which I'm not too upset about because it's kind of rainy anyways and really dark.
Don't make
This idiot trying to tease through the flooded
Don't
area.
take risks on treacherous
Only
roads,
in
and don't
LA.
swim in the sea.
But I thought I'd just record something I would normally play during that night. It's usually improvisation, but I have this piece here that I'm just kind of going to base things off of, but mostly kind of wing it. Actually, I'm almost done with this notebook. Really excited to start a new one. Anyways, let's go. Without further ado.
So to give an explanation of what's going on in this clip, I am basically playing and kind of looking at the sheet of paper where there are some musical ideas that I want to hit. So it's kind of the equivalent of when you're giving a speech, you might have some talking points on a piece of paper that are just little bullet points of main ideas you want to hit and just not forget to say it, So it gives structure to whatever you're performing.
Improvisation is playing without 100% planning out every little note. Like everything, it exists on a spectrum. So maybe you could be improvising a completely new song, or you could be improvising on a current song and maybe improvising 10% of it, so adding little drum fills that you didn't plan for, or adding a improvised solo. Some people like to call it fast writing. Other people like to call it talking. So right now I'm talking, but I'm not reciting things, right? I am using my brain to combine words that I already know into something new. So out of all of the things that you could possibly be doing with your time, why choose improv? Well, I'll try to convince you. You know how sometimes you feel sick and you know the answer is just that you need to puke? Well, improv is basically the artistic vomit. You let it all out. You let your feelings pour out into your music and you feel better. No agonizing over slowly writing something. I guess one thing that's intimidating about improv is that it's kind of the equivalent of drawing with pen. There is a certain amount of commitment that you have to be ready to give. But if you think about it, even with something as permanent as tattoos, there's ways in which you can change it. So you can straight up use a cover-up tattoo. There's a whole genre of that. Or you see people get one tattoo and then they get a whole damn sleeve because the context and things you put around that tattoo changes it as well. So in music, you play a note that's wrong. Is it really wrong? You can completely change it by adding more notes around it or repeating that motif that you created in order to legitimize it. So if it's a mistake, is it really a mistake? Is it? It all depends on how you react to it. It's an allegory for life. Shit happens that we don't plan for. And sometimes we're able to turn into something beautiful. Sometimes there's not much we can do about it. But that's what makes it human, and that's what makes it real. I love the fluidity and change in improv. So you can keep the same story that you're telling fresh, based and honest, based on how you feel about it in the moment. Like if you're telling your best friend a story about how someone hurt you today, maybe today you feel sad about it, but you tell another friend the same story a week from now and you just laugh and you think it's funny, or you're just detached from it. I love that with improv you can tell the same story in 100 different ways. I love the temporal nature of improv. Because if you think about a live band playing together, improvising, you know that, you standing there watching, it's only going to be played in that one way, in that one context, right now, never to be fully replicated again.
So it just reflects the impermanence of life. You're reminded that you have to be here now and experience things because everything is temporary.
All right, let's now talk about how I learned to improvise. And disclaimer, this is not to say that I'm like really great at improvising or whatever. I still feel like kind of a beginner. But hopefully it could provide some insight for anyone who wants to start their own improvisation journey, or just to provide another perspective for anyone who is already on their improv journey.
Step 1 was to build my technique toolbox. I grew up playing classical piano, had parents that endured the sound pollution that was my practicing, so I was very lucky in that I learned techniques at a young age. But I did come across a stumbling block. So aunties came to me, was like, "Oh, I hear you play piano. All right, play for Elise." I'm like, "Gotcha." "All right, it's Christmas time. Play Jingle Bells, Olivia."
I didn't learn that one. Do you have sheet music so I can read it?
They're like, "Come on, we all know Jingle Bells. Why couldn't I play it?" You see, the issue here was that I could read, then play, but I couldn't hear, then play. And that's the most important part of improvisation, to be able to play what you can hear in your mind. So the way that I develop my mind-to-body connection is the classic answer of transcribing, learning your favorite songs by ear. But if you think about it, there's songs that we're all obsessed with and listen to 200 times willingly. So at that point, might as well learn it, am I right? It is kind of fun. It's like a video game. Because when you're playing a video game, you're trying to beat the levels and you have to do it in a very specific way. Same thing with transcribing. You look up and you're like, wow, I've spent the last 7 hours transcribing this thing. And it feels fun that something you love can come out of your body. The answers are in the records. When you play along to your favorite records, you can play along with your favorite musicians. When you transcribe your favorite records, for a moment, you can embody your favorite musicians. When it comes to specific music theory techniques, I think about them as tools in a toolbox. So certain artists can just rock with a ballpoint pen and paper and create a masterpiece. Other artists like to use 100 different mediums and 100 different colors. Some music is pretty minimal. Some other music is like Jacob Collier throwing every technique known to humankind into a song. I think a really helpful quote that I like comes from Miles Davis. He was talking about a guitarist named John Bingham. "He just hears sounds that are unbelievable. He keeps telling me he wants to learn all that kind of stuff, all about orchestration and so on. But I tell him not to worry about that because I is italicized, I know about that. I'm afraid that if he does learn it, it will fuck with his natural gift. Because that's what happens sometimes, A guy like Jimi Hendrix or Sly or Prince might not do what they have done if they had known all the rest of that technical stuff, because it might have gotten in their way. And they might have done something else had they known all that other stuff." So the term gear acquisition syndrome? I feel like technique acquisition syndrome is also a thing, where you're so focused on learning all the techniques, learning all this information and stuff, that it can get in the way of creating. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to collect gear or collect techniques, but if your goal is to end goal is to make music, or your end goal is to improvise, you gotta keep the end in mind. All right, don't make the mistakes like me. I'm just keep studying and reading so much, and never, when I actually end up doing my end goal of improving, all that shit goes out the window. It's not to say I never use music theory. It's really helpful. You're improv and you got stuck and you can't think of anything. It's cool to just throw a little technique. Oh, I think a minor 11 would sound good here.
Like, I accidentally played an F sharp, but I was in the key of A minor. Let me just switch over to E minor now so it sounds right, you know? It's always a balance, so choose how you want to build out your own toolbox. All right, this is it's very personal kind of decision.
All right, number 2 is deciding on the form. So this is basically like deciding the rules of the game that you're going to be playing. So you can either choose from existing rules, or you can choose to make up your own rules. It all depends on you. Just to give a couple examples, during the Baroque period, 1600s, dusty ass, white wigs, think Bach, think Vivaldi, Four Seasons. During that time, some musicians played figure bass, which is basically the bass line's all written out and then some numbers under it, indicating like the chord that will be played on top, and then everything else is improvised. If you fast forward to the 1940s in the US, that's where lead sheets come in, and we still use them to this day. It's where the melody is written out and then there's chords on top, the typical like modern Western notation system. And if you think about bebop era musicians such as Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, Bird, Dexter Gordon, traditionally they're playing the head all the way through, which means that they're playing the melody as is. And then they play over and over again the chord changes, following the chord changes, but improvising all the complex lines that go along with the chord changes. Or if you're comping, you can figure out what types of voicings you want to use, and that can also be improvised. So when choosing the form, if I am feeling decision fatigue, I like to place some limitations so I'm not overwhelmed with too many choices. So I just tell myself, oh, I'm just gonna jam on 2 chords right now. That's it, just 2 chords. But if I'm feeling uninspired and I want to do more, I can lift away those limitations and just freeform playing whatever's in my heart. So just depending on the situation, depending on what you're feeling, just choose the form that's right for you. 3 is to play to an appropriate skill level. I think this goes into like the concept of flow. But basically the concept of flow is that you want to find the appropriate level of challenge. Not too challenging where you're overwhelmed, but challenging enough to where you're stimulated. So you're in a state of flow, and that's where all the magic and creativity and flow happens. Like for me, like I started off classical musician, real cocky. I played super fast. It's all about impressing people, right? And right off the bat, I tried to play at like 1,000 BPM. That's not a thing, but you get what I mean. I tried to play super fast and improvise, but I just sounded like a fucking asshole. If you're starting off, I still feel like I'm starting off. Start simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. Great advice. Hurts my feelings every time.
I didn't mean to say stupid, but start off simple. Start off with what you know, and increase the level of challenge so that like you feel like you're in that flow state, right? All right, pulling out the Miles Davis autobiography again. If you haven't read, totally recommend. Some juicy stuff in here. But what he says is, I've always told the musicians in my band to play what they know, italicized, and then play, italicized, above that. Again, I've told the musicians in my band to play what they know, then play above that. Because then anything can happen, and that's where great art and music happens. Last but not least, number 4, play with intention. So this goes back to your own personal why. When you're playing, are you closing your eyes and picturing a specific scene? Whether it's, an open, grassy field, wind, you're lying down, or it's some memory that you're drawing from? Or is it this like feeling that you're trying to share and convey and channel through your artistic expression? Because it is possible to just play with muscle memory,
But ultimately, what's the point in that? That's like people that just talk just to talk without really any meaning or point to it. And we don't want that, do we? Maybe I'm speaking for myself. So the root of it all comes down to the concept of soul. So whatever you believe in, that creates everything. So whether you feel like you're being channeled from something outside of yourself and you're just a vessel for this like idea, or if you feel like, oh, it's coming from my heart, it's coming from my chest, it's something that eventually, you know, you hear in your mind, you hear in your ears, and then with your technical abilities, you're able to bring it into this physical reality. Ultimately, it comes from your heart and soul, whatever that means to you. It's just how your heart sings. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck to you on your own improv or general creative journey.
All right, that's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in.